All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the table. I am more than excited about our guest today. And before I introduce her, I would invite all of you to subscribe to the YouTube channel because if you're not able to make the live session, I do post all of these on my YouTube channel so that you can share it with others and with your teams. And today's episode is so important that I would love for you to share it, especially if you work in the HR space. Share this with your teams because people need to hear this message. So I don't want to be rude and not introduce my guest, but I feel like it's so important that we talk about this and that we share it as often as we possibly can and start to create normalcy around these conversations. And so by subscribing and sharing this video, hopefully we will make one small step in that direction. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming the amazing, talented, vulnerable, and just inspiring Natasha Bowman to the table today. Super excited you're here, friend.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here today.
So you and I met a while ago, and we've had some great conversations, and we have some pretty exciting things in the works that we're
Yes.
not going to talk about yet today, but we have some really cool things
Yeah.
coming up in the future. So that's a little teaser for later. But really, what I wanted to bring forward, or have you bring forward, is one. Let's talk a little bit about the work you do, your company. Your website is phenomenal. And then let's talk about your journey. You were brave enough to share with the world was it a month or two ago now?
A month or two ago,
A
yeah.
month or two ago, your experience with being diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
And it has been a journey for you before the diagnosis and certainly since the diagnosis, right? And I would love for the world to hear as much as you're comfortable sharing with us and what is so the audience understands. One of the things that has really bonded Natasha and me is that I also have experience with bipolar disorder.
Yep.
I am personally not bipolar, but at least one of my parents is, and one of my parents took his life. My father took his own life. And I wonder if it wasn't as a result of mental illness that was undiagnosed. Certainly at the time, it was definitely not talked about. So Natasha, tell us about the work you do.
Okay.
And your organization and all the amazing things that you have going, and then maybe talk a little bit about your story. And I will share as much of the graphics as I can as you're talking.
Okay, will do. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. And it has truly been such a treasure to have met you. It was an instant connection. And like you said, I'm so excited about the things that we have coming up that we'll share with the world a little later. I am Natasha Bowman. I'm the president and founder of Performance Renew, which is a leadership development, talent management, DEI firm based out of New York City. You can probably tell from my accent, I'm not originally from New York City. I get lots of stares around here. It's the most diverse city in the world, but I'm the one that gets a stare about my accent. So I tell people I'm from LA. I get another blank stare, Lower Alabama. Is what I mean by that. But I am a labor and employment law attorney by education, but decided early in my career that I didn't want to be on the dark side of misconduct in the workplace and came on over to the HR side, beginning my career with Walmart Stores Incorporated. Then I transitioned to be the head of HR at several hospitals in the New York City area before founding my firm. And the mission and journey of my firm is to create positive, engaging, and inclusive workplaces. As simple as that, right? And we do that in many ways. We do it through workplace organizational culture assessments. We do it through training and development, executive coaching, and things along that nature. I'm also a published author. I published my first book, 2017, called You Can't Do That at Work. Thank you.
Yes, there it
Yes.
is.
I found myself as I was consulting firms and many people were put into leadership positions without being prepared for that. And I found myself saying, you can't do that at work, And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to immortalize all of these conversations and things into that book. And I have a second book that's coming out in the spring, which I'm so excited about. It's based on my TED Talk, and it's called The Power of One, Leading with Civility, Candor, and Courage. So very excited for that this spring. More to come on that on a publication date. But again, I think with this book, we have focused so much. I used to get so many calls about doing anti-harassment training, those types of things, but it really starts, right? Unlawful conduct, toxic workplaces starts with little subtle inequities, right? And it starts with incivilities and things like that. So that's what this book is about. Let's address what lies beneath toxic workplaces, which is incivility, not being candid, not creating cultures of courage, right? And so that's what that book is about. So that's me in a nutshell. But what I have seen my conversation, as you talked about, really transitioning to, and what I hope that a lot of my work will be focused on in 2022 is about mental health in the workplace. And as I just described, I lead a very, very busy life, including, managing, my LinkedIn social media platform with almost 80,000 followers. So that within itself is almost a full-time job, creating content and things like that for that. And, I was traveling around the world, speaking, et cetera, et cetera. And then March of 2020 hit. And my world came to a halt. Everything at that point was canceled. I had a trip to Indonesia to pick up an award. I was issued the recognition of a top 30 global guru in management. I was going to Indonesia to pick up that award, and I was planning a big conference. All of these things were happening, and then COVID happened, and all of that got canceled. And I found myself wondering, well, who are you? Because what I realized, what I didn't know then, I realized later, was that I channeled so much of my energy into my profession. Because being a Black woman from the South, I always felt like I had something to prove. Like I needed to exceed every expectation in life. I was always, like I said, on this move to just be the best and become the greatest and have this large influence. And when that was all taken away by COVID, I was left with, well, who am I? What is my worth? What is my value? And I went searching for that worth and value in different ways and unhealthy ways for the next few months. And then after that, I kind of crashed and, really went into a very, very dark place. And it was at that time where I found myself not being able to get out of bed. And at this point, my business had actually picked up tremendously because in May 2020, there was a murder of George Floyd, and there was a racial reckoning in workplaces across the country. So my business actually had picked up. But for some reason, I still found myself in this very, very dark place. And so I was left to wonder, wait a minute. Now, I thought that I was, not feeling well because I didn't know if my business was going to survive COVID, but yet here it is thriving, doing the best it's ever been. And I still have issue getting myself up and out of the bed every day, So what is this? And I found myself going deeper and deeper into this hole, and I couldn't pull myself out of it. And like I said, I'm curious, like what's happening? I have everything to be grateful for, everything to be happy for. I have a wonderful husband, a great family, this thriving career, but yet I wake up and I cry at every moment that I possibly could. Until one day, and I'm sharing this with you, Barbara, Barbie, on this platform for the very first time that someone has heard this. But I woke up one day finally in January and decided I no longer wanted to be here. And when I say here, I mean on this earth. and I attempted to take my life. And that led me, I woke up in a mental health institute and stayed there for 10 days. And it was then that I was diagnosed during that stay with bipolar disorder. And it really put a lot of things together for me at that point. It put together how I could work 2, 3, 4 days straight with little to no sleep,
Yeah.
and that feeling of euphoria, and I can achieve anything and I have to achieve anything. And then I thought I was burned out on those days where I couldn't get out of bed. I said, you know what? I've been working for weeks straight. I'm just tired. But those ups and downs were bipolar disorder. And when I look back upon that, whether it was during my corporate career, whether it was during my running this business, a lot of it had to do about the workplace and, being a minority, being a woman in the workplace or a woman minority owned business, and the stress that went with that, the expectation that went with that, and the days where, yeah, I went years without taking vacations and things like that. And so now that's where my conversation is now shifting. While my disorder, of course, is not brought on upon because of work, but there were certain aspects of my career that exasperated and triggered parts of this disorder.
Sure. Wow. First of all, thank you. Thank you for sharing such intimate details of your experience and for honoring us and the audience with your story. It's powerful. And, it's when I think about how successful you are and you have been, and from looking at the outside, you have it all, right? Everything is perfect. And as I'm listening to your story and I think about my experience growing up with my mom,
Mm-hmm.
who is also has bipolar disorder, but of course wasn't diagnosed either.
Right.
She has the exact same behavior patterns.
Mm-hmm.
She's a nurse, an RN, so she would work, 3 or 4 doubles in a row and
Mm-hmm.
then crash for days. And we
Mm-hmm.
literally would not see her. She wouldn't come out of her
Yep.
room.
Yep.
And I think what's really hard, and I don't know if this is your experience, but the world kind of applauds uh,
Mm-hmm.
that hustle culture, right? Where you
Right.
can do it all and you can stay up for days and you can
Mm-hmm.
do things. And so when you're rewarded for that, then
Mm-hmm.
it's reinforced. So why would you even stop to examine it?
Right.
Because everything is great, because that's what the world tells us we're supposed to do, or at least in the United
Mm-hmm.
States, maybe
Mm-hmm.
not around the globe, but at least our culture is very much one of, you want more, you have to do more, you have to work harder, you have
Right.
to work longer, you have to, be the superhero in every aspect of your life.
Mm-hmm.
um, so when you went through this, how have you now made changes in your life? First, you announced it, which I think
Yes.
the courage that it must have taken. Like, tell us about what led you to make that decision to announce this to the world, because that must have been a really difficult thing to do.
It really was. And I, was really torn with it for many, many months. Like I said, I spent my time in the behavioral health facility in January. I pretty much I left there with a lot of shame and embarrassment and humiliation. I looked around, I thought everybody knew. I was like, everybody knows there's something wrong with me. Everybody knows where I've been. So I kind of hid from the world for several months. I would peek my head out every once in a while on LinkedIn, but not nearly the level of engagement that I typically did. And, I was getting, thank goodness for so many supporters, because you don't know you're missed, right? Until somebody tells you you're missed. And I was getting messages, where are you? I miss seeing you on my timeline. And but I was just so shamed. And so I gradually reintroduced myself to LinkedIn, and came back, and people were still asking, like, oh, where were you, what happened? And I thought about it, as I came to accept the diagnosis, came to accept that it wasn't my fault. I didn't do anything wrong, because it was a lot of self-blame there. What was I missing? And so once I got past all of that, I started to wonder how many other people were suffering, or going through these things and had no idea what it was, or you're suffering from it. You have it, and you too feel that shame and embarrassment and humiliation. And I thought about that just day after day after day, and just one day it hit me. I'm like, I have. Why do I have all these tens of thousands of people that I'm connected with? Why have I been given this huge platform? Is it just to build a business, or is it something deeper than that? And just one day, just one night, I was like, it's something deeper. I've got to use my platform. I've been preaching this, about it as it relates to race relations, LGBTQIA issues, things like that. But why am I not using my own platform for something that is not talked about? So I told my husband one day, I said, I think I'm going to come out on LinkedIn. And and he was so supportive of it. He goes, I trust you. I know you always know the right thing. So just one morning, I remember waking up just like at 6:30 in the morning and writing that post, posting my picture, my headshot, and my professional headshot, and saying, this is the face of bipolar disorder. And just started writing and put my phone down, did not think that anybody would really care. And then all of a sudden my phone just started buzzing out of control. I'm like, what's happening? And at that point I realized what was happening. The comments, I had over 500 direct messages of people sharing their story, and it was just amazing, the amount of support, the amount of connection, um, of people sharing their same story. And it was so crazy because what the first thing I realized was that this condition has no color, no race, no economic status, no political affiliation. People from all aspects of life reached out and shared their story and thanked me for sharing my story. And I'm sorry, I have a little kitty cat that decided to come and join in the conversation. And it was just amazing to me. It was people who were blatantly racist. I would go look at their profiles and social media, blatantly racist, but they poured their hearts out to me in a DM.
Wow.
And I'm like, this was the right thing to do. And I've got to keep this conversation going because obviously, in this so divisive world that we're living in right now, this is a common connection across everything. And it will continue to be. We are still dealing with the impact of what we went through over the past, year. And so, and from a mental standpoint, I think about my daughter who was pretty much in isolation. She's the only child at home. And the fact she was in that room for so many months, just at school, didn't have a sibling, couldn't be with her friends. How is that going to impact her in the long run? So this is the common connector. And so really it was just, you know what, I need to be able to let people know when you think of people with mental health, a lot of people have a picture in their head. They may think of, people engaged in criminal activity or walking down the street. I live in New York City, talking to themselves and things.
Homelessness.
Like the homelessness and I'm like, no, that's that, but that's not the whole story. And there's a famous TED talk, the danger of a single story. And that's the danger of this, right? Is that when we think of mental health issues and mental illness, that's what we think about. We don't picture a face like mine. And that's what I want people to picture. I want people to think that this can happen to anyone, someone successful, someone with a family. I don't have any childhood trauma that I share. I don't have any of that you see on TV. I can't point to any of that. But that's what I want people to know, that it's not your fault. It's nothing you've done wrong if you have this, and to understand it for those that are going through it. And to be honest, a lot of my family, because there's so much stigma around it, especially in the Black community, a lot of my family has not been accepting of this diagnosis and me going public. And there are members of my immediate family who have not spoken to me in months. And
is that
that's
shame? Do you feel like that shame that they're feeling or experiencing? It reflects
absolutely.
on them.
Yeah, I mean, because growing up in the Southern South, you feel like you have to, as a Black person, have this perception of perfection, and
Right.
so therefore, this is a significant imperfection, and you're putting a mark on our family, and so therefore, just have not been spoken to, just completely off the radar. But that's something I had to accept. Not to say it's not upsetting, and I don't get sad about it. But it really shows you the people that have stood by me, such as my husband and many others. It shows you who's really there for you, But to me, I see it as not necessarily abandonment. I see it as ignorance and lack of education. And maybe one day they will take the time to educate themselves and be more accepting.
Mm-hmm. There's so much I want to talk with you about. One of the things I was thinking about as you were sharing your story and what inspired you to share your story is I was listening to a podcast. This was probably almost a year ago, and it was Brene Brown and the author, one of the original two authors of the 5 Stages of Grief.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I don't remember the gentleman's name off the top of my head. But what was really interesting is that he has now written another book about the 6th stage of grief after he lost his adult son.
Okay.
I think his son was 21 or 22 and he passed away. And of course, everybody then looks to this person who wrote about the stages of grief and said, what now, how are you going to deal with this loss? And what he recognized was there was something missing when you go through the stages, and they're not linear, right? You can bounce all around through those stages, but the 6th stage is finding meaning. And when I hear your story and what has inspired you to share it, it's not that you're thrilled that you have this illness, but you have found meaning in it by sharing your story and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, right? Because we know that you can't be courageous without being vulnerable. They're inextricably connected. And the fact that the meaning behind this is that how many hundreds, if not thousands of people, your story is going to touch and help, and maybe help them find the courage to share their story or their experience, or even seek help. Because maybe how many people like you were experiencing these symptoms but didn't even identify them as an illness. And I applaud every step you have taken, because how many posts do you scroll through on LinkedIn and Instagram, Facebook, and probably any social media platform where when someone is diagnosed with cancer or survives cancer or any kind of illness, and people are rallying around them. And there's no shame in that, right? People are like, yes, you got it. You beat it. We're here for you, whatever you need. And yet this illness is no different. It is no different than a cancer diagnosis. It just has so much stigma around it that I think it's every one of these conversations helps lift that veil, so that people recognize this isn't within your control. You didn't ask for it. It's not an excuse for bad behavior. It's truly an illness like any other illness.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love you brought up meaning, because that was also a part of my decision-making process, because when you survive a suicide attempt, you do ask yourself, well, why did I survive? Obviously it wasn't my time. And that was brought into my decision-making process too, is I'm here for a reason. And there's a deep reason because I was determined not to be here, and I made it through. And so therefore, going into that meaning part of it, while you talked about it in terms of grief, it's also for the survival as well. And it's funny because I've been faced with death, earlier in my life. If you watch my TED talk, and I talk about it frequently, of 11 years old being told that I had 6 months to live. And so, I remember at 11 years old, at that point, as soon as the doctor said that, I immediately told the doctor, well, I can't die. I have cheerleading. I made a cheerleading team and I have to cheer next year. literally my response. My mom is like bawling, and I'm like, oh no, sorry, that I can't do that. Take that off of your agenda because I've got a cheer next year. And that's what got me through it, through the open heart surgery. And I recovered in record time because I had meaning ahead of me. I knew that I had
Yes.
something that was important to me, which was cheerleading ahead of me. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go through this, going to put this scar. They're like, you probably won't be able to cheer still because you have this big scar going down your chest. Once again, I was like, no, this is going to happen. And I made it happen. And that particular situation really has helped me, throughout life when I have faced other obstacles. I'm like, no, I've always made sure that I had a goal that I was always working towards and that I had meaning and purpose in my life.
Purpose. Yeah.
And I learned that at an early age. And, but just for that moment, I didn't feel that purpose. I didn't see that meaning. And
Right.
without that, right, I felt the need to, I felt that, okay, well, why I shouldn't be here. So it's so important, right, that we all take a moment to really think about, why am I here on this earth? What is my purpose? What is my meaning? And keep our eye on that. And that helps us, right, to get up in the morning, to show up. As I tell my adult son every single day, I text him, get up, show up, and show out.
Yeah.
And you've got to have that purpose and that meaning. And I learned that as a child. I forgot it just for a second as an adult. But I'll never forget that again. I'll never forget that there is meaning in my life and I am here to serve a purpose. And that purpose may change, because I never thought in a million years that my conversation would be about mental health.
Sure.
But that purpose changes, but as long as you always have a purpose, and that's why you're here.
It's so important. I would love to ask you, and just so the audience knows, we did not rehearse this conversation. So your boundaries are your boundaries, Natasha. But I'm really curious to know, when you were in the mental health facility and you were going through your diagnosis and your treatment, was there a point in time and that you, once you recognize, like, what helped you recognize that, okay, this is what this is?
Yeah.
Was it testing? Was it conversations? And the reason I'm asking is certainly not for you to share anything you're not comfortable with, but as you know, my audience and the audience of the table is often folks within the human resources space, the workplace, business leaders. And if we can share with them anything that might help them in their role to support the people within their organizations with cues and clues and resources, I want to be able to do that. So you have this suicide attempt. Thankfully, you were not successful.
Right.
Selfishly for me, I'm so grateful. And so you're in this facility, and I'm sure they're first stabilizing you so that you're harming yourself. But what was the journey there, and how did those 10 days impact you enough that you now felt okay enough to leave and to move on?
Yeah, it was definitely a journey over those first 10 days. At first, like you said, it was stabilization. Someone's watching you 24/7 to make sure you don't harm yourself. And then once I got past that, it was, how did I end up here? Almost going through those stages of grief, just that kind of denial and, anger and, you felt very, very alone. And because it was COVID, you feel even more isolated. So a lot of times there are, activities you do together with the other patients. And like I said, because of COVID, that wasn't possible. But when we did, they brought us iPads and we were able to connect and do group things on the iPad. And I'm a very nosy person. I'm, a lawyer, so I research. So, people's names would pop up and I was like, oh, I wonder who that is. So I would Google them and their LinkedIn profile would come up and I'm like, oh my gosh, every single person that's here is a father, a mother, a wife, a professional, all of these different professions. And it was just that was a connection for me. I'm like, that's when I first realized okay, this is, more normalized than what I thought it was, right? And that really helped me with my awakening. The next thing was that I was disconnected. You only had that iPad for a few hours a day. The rest of the time, you're disconnected from the world, social media, things like that. And that really got me into a place where I could really just kind of do a lot of reflection and
Mhm.
introspection of myself and spend time with myself, because I never really spent time with myself before.
Yeah.
And I got to journal and, just really put some thoughts down and just have a deeper connection with myself. And I also, believe it or not, I had my husband to print off the draft of my book, The Power of One, and bring it up there. And I actually hand wrote and finished by hand the rest of my book in there.
Wow. That must have
Yeah.
been really powerful for
I
you.
mean, it was. I'm like, first of all, I can't believe I'm handwriting a book.
I
But
love
I had
it.
no choice. But I finished it there. So when I think about that time, and I think about, as you said, as we have people that are listening to this, and more likely than not, have someone in their organization, on their teams, that are suffering from bipolar disorder or a similar mental health issue. What can I do? When I think about it, it was more about when I had the opportunity to step away from this expectation of just excellence and exceeding expectations and everything that I do, and just having these moments to spend time with myself. I think that we need to give people the time to breathe and to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And I think it's been a whole lot of talk about the Great Resignation. I've heard that term probably more than COVID
Yeah.
over the past few months. If I think about that, I think about that's exactly what people are doing right now. They're saying, I've had an opportunity, rather than sitting in a car or, and commuting to work or doing all these other things. I've had now the time and the space to spend time with me or with my family and things that are most important to me.
Yep.
And while I thought at first my career and my profession was the most important thing, I've realized now that it's not. There are other things that are important. So,
Yeah.
what we have to do as organizational leaders is to embrace that, right? And I've talked a lot. I did a post about this and even put it in my newsletter. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to Let's Talk About Work newsletter. I talked about what corporate wellness really means. We think we're doing it, but we're really not. We think that providing gym memberships and step challenges and all of that other chinky stuff. Oh,
Mhm.
we're providing wellness. We're not. What we
Yeah.
have to do is unpack what it really means for our employees to be well. And it can't be just a mental health day. That mental health day has to be supplemented by, when I come to work, I'm not walking into toxic workplaces. Because if I
Mhm.
am, that one day means nothing. It's X'd out the moment I walk into the workplace.
Sure.
So, how can I create that same spirit and that same zen and that same experience on that mental health day when I'm able to connect with myself? How do we recreate that at work? And I
Mhm.
think that's the challenge for workplaces going forward, right? Where I don't need a mental health day because I can get what I need from a wellness standpoint, from a mental clarity standpoint, from a psychological safety standpoint, right here at work, that they can be hand in hand. And I
Yeah.
think that's the challenge that every workplace has to address.
I wholeheartedly agree. And like you said, the Great Resignation, I think it should be the Great Reckoning.
Mhm. Mhm.
And because so many things have happened over the past 2 years, and you mentioned before George Floyd's murder, and tragic, tragic. But the world acts like that's the first time it's happened.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's been happening for decades,
Okay.
centuries, right? We know this.
Mhm.
And so, for whatever reason, all of these things have happened one after the other. And I believe that we have accelerated in the past 18 months faster than we have in the past 20 years in the work. And employees now realize they're the ones with the power. They're the ones who can say, I'm not going to accept this anymore. I refuse to tolerate being treated poorly. And so employers and leaders, because we often refer to, and I love how you said this earlier, but we think about the company. So your book, The Power of One, a company is nothing but a collection of individuals. So we have to look at every conversation, every email, every point of connection, because that's what creates safety for people.
Absolutely.
We can say all we want about we have a great culture, but when you are dealing with a jerk who's, slamming you against the wall every day through email, that's not a great place to work. And so I love that you're addressing that. I'm going to bring that back up again here with your book, The Power of One. I love that. And I also want to share, you have bravely created a keynote, right? Your experience. And I think this is so important. And unmasked, turning pain into purpose. This is amazing. And this goes back to finding the meaning and finding the purpose. So if anyone watching or is interested in having Natasha share her story with your folks or at your conference or your employees, please reach out, because it's so important that these conversations happen, and they happen often, and they happen in a way that helps drive change and acceptance in our workplaces and in our families and in our churches. I've done a lot of work in the LGBTQ plus area as well. And we often forget about we talk about the workplace, and I get it, because that's what we do. And we both have businesses that focus on the workplace. But we also have to understand that every one of our employees has multiple dimensions to who they are, and they live their experience in work and outside of work. And so if we're not also sharing these messages in our churches, in our communities, in whatever ways we can, and reinforcing them, we're not going to see the change we need to see. Because if it's just a one-dimensional element, we're just not going to see the change. And I think we're ready for it. I think our people are ready for it. We just have to have courage, like you have, to be able to be brave enough to have these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, there's so many things I want to ask you and chat with you about. But how are you and your family today?
Oh, we're doing great. Myself, my husband, my two kids who are 21 and 13, doing well. And, this experience has taught them so much, about mental health, and, that they have no stigma around it. They have no shame. They have no, my daughter will tell me, hey, I'm having a bad mental health day. I just need to talk. I don't know what's wrong with me. And we talk through it, and I love that she feels comfortable saying that, because I would have never at 13 felt comfortable saying that. So in terms of that, doing very, very well. And, trying to, again, all of us are trying to turn this pain into purpose, just like the keynote. But like I mentioned earlier, there are, other members of my family that are, have not come to terms, with this. And so, that's a struggle there, but my immediate family, we will persevere and be resilient, and, use all of our platforms as much as we can. It's so beautiful just to hear my kids say, that they're proud that I'm doing this, and they're not ashamed. Neither one of them have said, oh, I'm so embarrassed. My mom just told the world, millions of people, that she has bipolar disorder. They are like, oh, I'm so proud of you for doing that. Both of them, and they're sharing it with their friends. And I've loved that as well, that I've had their just complete full support. That means so much to me, because, things like this can bring shame to a child, but They have been, very, very, supportive, and I really, I appreciate them, and especially my daughter. When I came home from the hospital, and you're still not, in a 100% great place, and she already had done research. What is this, and what's depression, and what's that, and every morning, because she was going to school remotely, every morning at 6:30, she would get me out of bed. She would get up, get me out of bed, and we would do Zumba. She knows I likes to dance. That makes me happy. And we would do Zumba. And she would make sure I got up, and she would not accept no for an answer, because she knew if she can get me up, she could get my blood going, hear good music, that more than the rest of my day is going to go well. She took that on as her own responsibility at 13. We're really at 13 years old, and I'm just so proud of her, for doing that, and feel so honored to have her as a child that saw that, and made sure her mom, was okay, and that she's doing her own research and doing what she could do, and she didn't have to. No 13-year-old wants to get up at 6:30 in the morning, especially if you're going to school remote and you just roll over and open your laptop. But she did that for several months, and so that's very, wonderful. Very appreciative of that. So that level of support has meant so much to me. My clients, when I shared it with them, they were just as supportive. And just going back to what we talked about a little while ago, it's all about that. It's all about, from an organizational leadership standpoint, providing support, empowering these types of conversations, right? So that people feel comfortable coming forward. Because if we start talking about it first as organizational leaders, even if we have moments of vulnerability and sharing our own stories around our own mental health struggles, or someone that's close to us, that's going to invite that conversation in. I'm going to say, oh, she gets it. I can tell her that I struggle, and this is what I need to be successful, right? We all need different things. If we think about what equity is in the workplace, it's about understanding that people need different levels of support to put everybody on that equal playing field. So what does that support look like for me? Don't define it for me. Some people, organizations, they're still saying things like, oh, we're going to have a 4-day work week. That's okay. Thanks for that. But that may not be what I need right now. It may be that I need to come in. I don't mind coming in 5 days a week, but I need to come in late because I want to get up and do my Zumba, because that's going to put me in my great headspace. And I don't want to wake up at 3:30 in the morning to be able to do it. So let me start my day later so that I can do the things I need to do to get into my right headspace, right? So don't define for me what wellness is, because wellness is going to be different individual by individual, right? So inviting those conversations, doing our best to accommodate wellness, which is usually really simple things. We just got to ask, stop just making stuff up, and just coming up with these big overall plans. And you haven't even asked what your employees need. You haven't assessed that. Start with an assessment of what that means to your employees.
Well, I think I love that. And, it is the individualization as much as you possibly can. And I understand in certain organizations and certain types of work, that's very difficult. In nursing, for example, they have 3 shifts. So to start creating multiple, that can be very difficult. In manufacturing and call centers, there are certain things. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other things that they might be able to be flexible with. So I think it's also letting go of this fear culture that anarchy is going to happen if we start allowing people to actually be people and meet their needs. And for so long, I think we've just gone through this stage of everything is about litigation avoidance. And if it's good for one, it has to be good for all. And we can't have any variables. And I'll be honest, I was one of those people. For a really long
time. HR folks, we were all for the yes.
Absolutely. It's like, no, we can't make exceptions. If we make an exception for one person, we're going to have to make an exception for everyone. But so what? If the business can still run, and what we're seeing as a result of people working remotely is better connectivity, better productivity, better engagement in a lot of cases, because people have the freedom and they feel empowered to have more control over their lives.
That's right.
I love what you said about wellness is not, it's not a pedometer on your shoe that you give away once a year.
Yep.
I mean, certainly physical wellness is a big part of
It
wellness.
is. It is.
But so is mental wellness, financial wellness, right? When we think about equity,
yes,
financial wellness is huge. And I do a lot of, I have a lot of conversations with Daily Pay. And I love that organization because when you look at their data and what their product is doing for minorities and individuals in lower socioeconomic spaces, it is truly creating equity and leveling that playing field. So wellness comes in so many different dimensions. We can't use one paintbrush to say this is what wellness means.
Yep.
And have you read the book Burnout yet?
I have not. You recommended it. I have not had an opportunity. I've got to. Yes.
Amazing. So Amelia and Emily Nagoski, and as a side, I'd love to have you guys on the show. But anyway, one of the things that they talk about in this book is how when we think about wellness and physical or physiological wellness, we are conditioned to believe that thin is well. And if you're heavier, you're unhealthy, you're lazy, all of these things, right?
Yep.
And there's research that they share in this book that talks about that whole BMI calculator is actually wrong. And there's data showing that people who are heavier are living longer, they're healthier than people who are on the lower end of that BMI scale and who are thinner and even underweight. And we know underweight is
dangerous,
significantly worse than overweight, right? So there's all of this data and evidence that's starting to come forward about what wellness actually means, and it's not what we've been conditioned or programmed to think.
That's right. It's so funny you say that. I just had my blood work done, and my doctor's like, "This is absolutely perfect." He was like, "What do you do? What do you eat?" It was absolutely perfect. And I'm an overweight person, so I don't look my numbers. But again, it goes to that single story analysis that I talked about earlier, right? And we buy into it. We don't challenge the perception, and we just accept it as it is what it is. And we've got to to get out of that mind frame, right? And really think about, again, what is wellness to the individual? Yes, walking definitely helps. That's proven. So a steps challenge is fine, but it's got to be more than that. We've got to be more thoughtful and more mindful around it. And I think a steps challenge is just an easy thing, and it's a great thing, but it's an easy thing. We don't want to take the time, like I said. You made a great point about people who do shift work and things like that. Maybe a schedule adjustment is not doable. But how, again, can you mindfully create these workplaces where if I were to take a mental health day, what would that look like? And how can I recreate that in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
What am I trying to achieve on this mental health day? What are my objectives? Can I not replicate that some way in the workplace, right? And I work with an organization that they have a wellness lounge where they have a massage chair, like at the malls, so you don't need coins. They have aromatherapy, they have yoga mat. So when you need to walk away, and it's a healthcare institution, if you've experienced a challenging patient or whatever, you can go into that room, decompose, and get into a good mental space before you go back. It's simple things like that that can be helpful.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's so much. I think there's other things we can do. And when we look at scheduling, when you are in a shift situation, what about creating an opportunity for people to select what shifts they work, right? Why do they have to be assigned to the same shift into perpetuity, right? Allow them to say, for these 3 months, I want to work first shift, but then my kids go to school, so I want to shift, and right? So give people as much ownership over their lives as you possibly can.
Yep.
That is what will create loyalty and connectivity between the employer and the employee. And we have got to start thinking that way. And I think some organizations are starting to think that way, and some of them just can't get out of their own way. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years. And will the pendulum swing again, or are we going to finally land in that middle space of normalcy where we treat adults like adults and
Yep.
allow them to think for themselves and
Mhm.
not infantilize them into one-dimensional beings of quote unquote an employee and
Yep.
remove their choices. So I love
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
So how can we um, help folks within our workplaces if you think someone might be struggling?
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on how to approach that in a respectful way so that they don't feel threatened, so that they don't feel like they're being outed when they're not ready? Maybe they don't even know themselves that they're struggling
Mhm.
in a way.
Mhm.
Do you have any thoughts on how to help someone, maybe connect them with support or
Mhm.
having a conversation? Because I think, again, it's not a one size fits all.
Right.
But I would love to know your thoughts. Had someone approached you before about this, what do you think you would have been receptive, or would have you said, no, I'm not, that's not me?
I would have said, "No, that's not me."
Yeah.
And I know that from experience because my husband recognized the change in my behavior as I was entering the mania part of bipolar in March of 2020. And
We lost you.
you lost me?
Hang on, guys. I know she'll be right back. There you are.
Okay. All right. You see me?
There you
You
are.
hear me?
Yep, I see you. I hear
Okay.
you.
I don't know what happened. Okay.
You said
Uh,
the last thing we heard was your husband recognized as you were entering into
Yeah,
the
entering mania, which is
mania.
the one side polar of bipolar. And he saw my change in behavior. He saw me talking extra fast and, just doing all of these things. And I was adamant that nothing was wrong with me. And I actually got angry when he would ask, is something wrong? So I think it depends on the person, their condition. Now I've lost you. So hopefully we're still on as I've lost Barbie. Oh, we've lost her altogether. So just hold on. I'm sure she'll be back on in just a moment. So either I've lost her or she has lost me. So I'll just go ahead and wrap it up for her or for myself. I don't know if I'm talking to myself or not. But essentially, every employee, every person is different, right, in their mental health journey. So the first thing we want to do is to make sure that we're creating spaces where people feel comfortable coming to us to say, I don't feel well. I need help. I need extra support. If they don't realize that their behavior is changing in some way and you do, then you can respectfully say, hey, I noticed some changes in your behavior, and can I talk to you about it and just give you my perspective? Maybe that's not the reality. This is my perspective, and let's talk about it. And if you can get to a place where you can offer them additional support, then that's what you can do. So I hope that this conversation went well for you. Please connect with both Barbie and myself on LinkedIn and other platforms. And we're going to continue this conversation as much as we possibly can. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. So I am recording this today, the day after the session I had with the amazing Natasha Bowman. And if you were watching us live yesterday, you likely saw a few blackouts. Natasha went away for a moment, and then I disappeared completely. Come to find out, there was a total outage of StreamYard yesterday, which is, I guess they have one of their servers is hosted by Google, and Google had some troubles. So that's what happened. So thank you for your patience. I'm going to edit this in to the video so that everyone understands what happened, and the amazing and truly professional that she is. Natasha handled it beautifully, and I thank everyone, and especially Natasha, for being an amazing guest. And as she said, we are definitely going to continue this conversation. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the Business of HR YouTube channel. I encourage you to do so. Each and every one of the table episodes are housed there in a playlist called The Table. So you can subscribe to that, hit the bell so that you're alerted each and every time we upload a new episode. Thanks so much. Have a great day.